After careful consideration of the evidence presented, this court finds the defendant guilty as charged. The sentence is...
On November 13, 2022, Moscow, Idaho, a quiet college town tucked in the northwest, became ground zero for one of America's most shocking crimes. For University of Idaho students Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were murdered in their off-campus home on King Road. That morning, what should have been the beginning of another ordinary week shattered into headlines across CNN, ABC News, NBC, The New York Times, and every local newspaper in the country. Evidence left behind painted a story of ruthless precision. The scene was chaotic, but what broke the case open was a single piece of evidence, a knife sheath left alongside one of the victims. Investigators performed DNA tests and, working alongside the Idaho State Police and the FBI, matched the sample to a suspect, Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old criminology PhD student at nearby Washington State University. Kohberger's world unraveled overnight. King Road became synonymous with tragedy and investigation. Law enforcement moved quickly. The Moscow Police Department, led by Chief James Fry, coordinated a multifaceted investigation: door-to-door interviews, extensive cell phone forensics, social media tracking, and combing through hours of surveillance footage. Evidence mounted: DNA linked to the knife sheath, cell tower records tracking movement in the area, and crucially, video captured by a neighbor's doorbell camera showing a car consistent with Kohberger's white Hyundai Elantra circling the block just before and after the estimated time of the murders. That Saturday night, Kaylee and Madison had been out at a local bar, then stopped at a food truck, chatting and laughing with friends. Xana and Ethan returned home after a night of fun on campus. Doorbell cameras, cell data, and even food receipts established the students' timeline up to 1:45 a.m. when they were last seen alive. The shockwaves rippled across Moscow and across the University of Idaho. Thousands gathered for candlelight vigils at Memorial Gym, news helicopters hovered over King Road, and social media thrummed with heartbreak, speculation, and pleas for justice. As the key phrases flooded the internet: Idaho student murders, King Road crime, Bryan Kohberger arrest, University of Idaho stabbing, and quadruple homicide, the world's eyes turned to this small town. The forensic investigation was relentless. Analysts pored over the knife sheath, pulling fibers and DNA that revealed more than fingerprints. They gave the case a trajectory. Kohberger's phone records, as revealed in court documents and official police reports, told a complex story: multiple visits to the area weeks before the murders, a device turned off during the critical window, and then pinging on highways as he seemed to flee the scene. His capture would not have been possible without a confluence of science and tenacity. Digital analysts reconstructed movement online. Instagram DMs, Snapchat stories, messages sent and unsent. Every byte became a breadcrumb leading to truth. On December 30, 2022, Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. News outlets flashed his mugshot, describing the drama of a cross-country manhunt, and authorities coordinated the extradition back to Idaho. Kohberger's arrest and subsequent trial became a focal point for true crime enthusiasts, legal analysts, and every person who lost sleep over the haunting question: why these four? Why Moscow? Why them? The community's pain was visceral. Families mourned in private, but Moscow itself mourned in the open. Candlelight, handwritten notes, flowers left outside King Road. These tributes became altars, reminders of lives cut far too short. Classmates, teachers, and friends spoke of laughter, kindness, and everyday dreams that vanished in a single night. Law enforcement, under a barrage of media attention and rampant online speculation, proceeded with care and precision. Each press conference brought new facts. Each request for public patience came with the gravity that this case demanded. Reports listed all official contributors: FBI laboratories for genetic analysis, police units for evidence collection, and judicial teams that would eventually see the suspect face trial. The legal battle was intense. Prosecutors outlined a web of circumstantial and scientific evidence: DNA on the knife sheath, cell phone geolocation, surveillance videos, behavioral profiling. Kohberger's legal team, headed by public defenders specializing in high-profile criminal cases, challenged every detail: chain of custody, timelines, even the methods of DNA analysis. Yet it was in the courtroom a place steeped in wood, silence, and the glare of justice that the true climax saw unfolded. Families sat stone-faced, awaiting the judge's final decision. The sentence was read aloud. Life in prison without parole. The words hung in the air, somber, decisive, a resounding answer. 2 months of pain, fear, and doubt. What had begun as a quiet night in November ended with a judge's gavel, echoing through Moscow and across the nation. Bryan Kohberger would never again walk free, but for Moscow, justice was only part of the healing. Vigils continued. The university held annual remembrance services, and crime scene investigators published their findings in law enforcement journals. King Road forever marked as a symbol of truth, resilience, and what it means for a small town to claim a sentence earned. This is not just a true crime story. This is a documentary about how science, community resolve, and the power of a single piece of digital evidence can illuminate the darkest corners of human tragedy and restore a measure of peace to those left behind. If you're searching for answers, delving into Idaho student murders, Bryan Kohberger case, and University of Idaho homicide, you have come to the crossroads of justice and heartbreak. Here, in Moscow, where crime met justice, every detail mattered. Every life changed the story forever. The investigation pressed on. Survivors, the friends who might have been there that night, classmates forever altered, spoke in interviews of changed lives, renewed vigilance, and lasting grief. Local government founded a safety initiative, spurred by parent advocacy and input from university mental health coordinators. Programs educated students not just about practical security locks, cameras, campus patrols, but also about empathy, trauma, and the dual edges of national attention. Memorial runs, scholarship endowments, and remembrance murals blossomed across Latah County, each a living testimony that bad things, when faced together, could root something resilient and hopeful. True crime writers in future years would frame the Moscow murders as an inflection point, the moment small towns realized no place is insulated from violence, but every place, given courage and collaboration, can be a crucible for justice. Social media posts tagged #MoscowRemembers became manual rituals. Each fall, as the leaves turned and the air sharpened, the families revisited the green space, sometimes together, sometimes alone, holding candles as dusk descended. A new cohort of Moscow police officers, many inspired by the case, completed cadet training and joined the department. Their first assignment, touring the preserved memorial, reading the final case file, hearing recorded testimony from the families. The King Road house, once a place of laughter, now a site of indescribable loss, was rebuilt as a peace garden. Flowers, stones, benches, and an inscription, "For Kaylee, Madison, Xana, Ethan. Moscow remembers." Moscow endures. Every visitor, from locals to travelers guided by Google Maps, left tokens of respect, ribbons, notes, sometimes just silent tears. The story's power continued, part caution, part inspiration. For the analysts who track cell tower pings, for the young criminology students poring over forensic journals, for every judge or juror who must carry the weight of verdicts, Moscow's tragedy serves as both warning and blueprint. Never underestimate the consequences of a single night, nor the ability of science and community to reclaim light. As generations pass, Moscow's story is retold in schools and living rooms, at academic conferences and reunions. Survivors and their descendants find meaning in shared purpose. Students launch awareness campaigns, local counselors run town hall meetings, and law enforcement hosts open days honoring the lives lost and the lessons learned. Court transcripts remain archived online for researchers and the public. They are pored over by journalists writing anniversary pieces, by law students examining the efficacy of DNA evidence, and by families searching for a final answer to every what if. Bryan Kohberger serves his sentence in a maximum security facility, seldom speaking, occasionally mentioned in updates about prison reform or criminal psychology. His name, once notorious, fades against the backdrop of the student's legacy. The focus shifts, rightly so, to what Moscow built out of tragedy: rituals of safety, networks of grief counseling, art installations, and most of all, ongoing acts of kindness in the students' names. Each fall, as leaves blaze through gold and scarlet, the city is reminded not of the killer's shadow, but of the light of for young lives and the way an entire community chose justice, hope, and remembrance above despair. "We are stronger together," reads the banner at the memorial gym each November, as candles flicker against the early dusk. For those new to the story, those searching Moscow, Idaho crime story, Bryan Kohberger sentencing, University of Idaho homicide investigation, there is comfort in knowing that every voice, every lesson, every sentence earned continues to shape the heart of this remarkable town. And so this town, once just a dot on the map, a backdrop for college friendships, became a symbol of resilience, advancement, and remembrance. National law enforcement seminars updated their training with the Moscow case file, teaching investigators how digital evidence, rapid coordinated response, and coordinated community action saved weeks, maybe months of uncertainty. Professors at universities far beyond Idaho reference the tragic November night, not simply to recount loss, but to exemplify the cooperation and integrity required to solve such cases. Journalists revisiting Moscow for Where Are They Now? Segments found a city transformed, quietly vigilant and fiercely proud. People who never knew the victims found themselves narrating the events to their own children, emphasizing empathy, courage, and the importance of both scientific rigor and human decency. It was no longer only about Bryan Kohberger or even solely about the 4 young lads lost. It was about possibility, proof that society can and will respond to its darkest tests not only with sensation, but with substance. On quiet nights, the sound of laughter can once again be heard on campus. New students walk across the memorial garden, some pausing to read the inscription, some simply breathing easier in the light that's returned. Each year, on the anniversary, people bring kayaks to the river, yellow roses to classroom doors, poems and stories to open mics dedicated to Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. The Moscow murders, a phrase once typed in fear and outrage, has, over time, yielded to words of legacy, hope, and the wisdom of a community forever changed. Above all, the lessons endure. For every shadow cast by violence, there can be 1,000 acts of remembrance. For every family shattered, there can be 1,000 voices raised to comfort, to defend, to illuminate the lost. And for every haunting night, there is always, because justice demands it, the breaking of a new day. In the archives of true crime, the Moscow case is a masterclass. Investigators blend digital footprints with boots-on-the-ground work. Community members show the world the transformative power of collective mourning, and every anniversary brings new lessons woven into the city's identity. Scholars present papers on how the case shifted the paradigm for multi-agency collaboration. FBI, Idaho State Police, local authorities, and university security. Forensic labs developed new standards after learning from the knife sheath's discovery. Its DNA evidence now a case study in criminal justice courses. To families, foreign advocacy groups honored at national gatherings on victims' rights, their words echo in state legislatures debating amendments for campus safety nationwide. Students write essays inspired by Kaylee's determination, Madison's leadership, Xana's warmth, Ethan's humor turning tragedy into motivation, grief into action. Bryan Kohberger's trial and life sentence are referenced in law reviews, psychological profiles, and government memos on the dangers of extremity in criminology. His silence becomes a recurring footnote in the larger narrative, a reminder that even profound knowledge of criminal process cannot replace empathy or humanity. Media producers produce interviews with the retired detectives Chief James Fry, lead investigators that provide new insights for those researching Idaho student murder solved. King wrote evidence breakdown, Kohberger DNA trial, long-form news stories and podcasts to dissect each courtroom moment, DNA submission, motion filed, verdict deliver. In every chapter of Moscow's rebuilding, the presence of justice is not just remembered, but enacted, a mosaic of new streetlights, support networks, procedural reforms, and the persistent glow of memorial candles. The phrase "sentence earned" is painted not only on banners, but impressed in the hearts and habits of every person determined that such a night will never come again. On podcasts, documentary panels, and social forums around the world, the conversations continue. What made the Moscow case so pivotal? Was it the technological evidence, a marriage of DNA, digital forensics, and surveillance video? Was it the unwavering pressure applied by the loved ones of Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan? Or was it simply the unyielding refusal of a small community to surrender to fear? Each theory gains followers, but all agree on the fundamentals. This case showed that evil can arrive anywhere, and that collective resolve, scientific acumen, and transparent legal process are the most powerful tools available to the modern world. Writers tracing the web traffic around the search term Idaho student murder solved note that interest hasn't faded, and that with every retelling, new details surface, sometimes through records released years later, sometimes through interviews with those forever marked by loss. Local businesses display pictures of the victims and their families, reminder that flourishing commerce and historic tragedy inhabit the same streets. Cafes host open mic nights for poetry and conversation. Proceeds from Every Cup funding scholarships and victims assistance programs. Churches, synagogues, and community centers invite guest speakers to discuss resilience and the lessons of Moscow. Meanwhile, on university campuses far beyond Idaho, UCLA, Michigan, North Carolina, Florida, dormitory monitors cite the Moscow case in orientation, and safety apps for students grow ever more sophisticated. National magazines highlight how tragedy in one small place can forge reforms and raise expectations for thousands of others. And at the Green Memorial, the names Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan glint in gold beneath the autumn sun. The town's children, some of whom weren't even born when the murders took place, are told of what happened not to scare, but to teach. Courage is remembering, a father whispers, and building something brighter just beyond the shadows. As the years stretch onward, networks like Netflix, HBO, and the BBC produce streaming documentaries based on the Moscow case, blending interviews with local police, national criminology scholars, surviving family members, and investigative journalists who covered the tragedy as it unfolded. These productions elevate awareness, attract international viewership, and bring new insights into law enforcement's evolving use of DNA, surveillance technology, and digital forensics. Meanwhile, Bryan Kohberger's incarceration is rarely discussed except in updates to true crime forums and criminal psychology publications. Instead, Moscow's story is refocused. Every broadcast, every memorial, every public address highlights not only the tragedy, but the unity and innovation that follow. Annual Remembrance Day observances at the University of Idaho see thousands in attendance. Candles, letters, and personal tributes to Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan form an ocean of light beneath fading autumn leaves. The campus security office, now among the most advanced in the region, displays a wall of achievement, campus safety protocols, successful crisis drills, statistics showing the decline in off-campus assaults since reforms inspired directly by the King Road investigation. Environmental design specialists tour the Memorial Peace Garden, noting how natural barriers, lighting improvements, and visibility upgrades serve as silent guardians. Parents visiting for move-in weekends offer thanks to staff members whose vigilance is rooted in the lessons of 2022. Media outlets cover the ceremonies with respect and depth, often publishing profiles not only of the victims and their families, but of the first responders, forensic analysts, counselors, and legal professionals whose careers were shaped by the investigation. Articles optimized for Moscow, Idaho crime legacy, sentencing aftermath, and healing after tragedy earn substantial local and national search interest. And so, in every direction, the legacy grows, woven through digital archives, mapped into academic papers, painted in community murals. Moscow is never defined solely by one night of terror, but by everyday sense, where healing, reform, valor, and shared memory mark the passage of time. Across social media, the hashtag sentence earned becomes synonymous with both justice delivered and lives honored. True crime creators adapt the phrase for new investigative series, shining the spotlight on towns that face similar tragedy and found a path forward. Moscow's model is studied: rapid mobilization, community solidarity, transparency through press releases, and scientific rigor. Legal experts underscore the value of digital trace evidence in modern trials, referencing Kohberger's cell tower data and doorbell footage as breakthroughs in local law enforcement procedure. Analysts compare Moscow's case to historic investigations like the Golden State Killer and Ted Bundy, other high-profile crimes solved with advances in forensic science. The common lesson: collect every detail, share fact, not rumor. Occasionally, victims' families visit forums and reply to messages, offering support to parents in different states grappling with fear or sudden loss. These exchanges are reminders that justice is not just courtrooms, it is comfort given, advice shared, memories kept alive. grief management technique scoping meetings, trauma therapy, crisis response spread from Idaho across districts, meeting a growing need. Nonprofits founded in the victims' names continue to present at national conferences their annual reports detailing progress, scholarships awarded, emergency phone lines answered, campus reforms enacted. Every youth helped is a living legacy, every safer campus a tribute. Church bells, sirens, and songs fill Moscow once a year on the anniversary, the sound carrying across Greater Lada County. Residents look to the sky and remember a small town forever changed, but always determined to embody the very best of courage, compassion, and truth. Medical and criminal justice colleges add the Moscow case to their curriculum, debates centering on ethical technology use, the boundaries of privacy, and the impact of media coverage on both investigation and personal healing. Seminars prompt students to reflect on empathy for victims and the personal toll of careers spent in trauma's orbit. Retired detectives revisit the town, sometimes meeting families quietly over coffee, sometimes joining public events to share what's changed: smarter policing, better technology, deeper trust. They say, often, that justice was earned not only by the badge, but by relentless community support and the compassion of strangers. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, and forensic analysts are invited as guest lecturers, their expertise lending layers of depth to the evolving field. Social scientists publish studies on community resilience based on Moscow's experience, analyzing social media engagement spikes, interviews with local leaders, and longitudinal data on campus safety. The King Road tragedy becomes, in part, a case study in the value of transparency, rapid response, and responsible reporting. National news outlets annually return for impact follow-ups, profiling survivors, law enforcement, and new students to pass through the university's halls. Campus tour pause at the Peace Garden, alignment of flowers and stones mapped for reflection and comfort. The site is geotagged in digital archives, enabling searches for Moscow Healing Memorial, King Road Peace Garden history, and similar phrases. Throughout all retellings, the same foundation recurs: when everything is at stake, what matters most is justice, memory, and the responsibility to protect those who come after. The events of November 13, 2022, are now woven into Moscow's very sense of self. Survivors mark each milestone with remembrance graduation speeches, new faculty appointments, and even incoming class orientation silently acknowledging the cost of the town's safety. New residents sometimes ask about King Road. Long-time locals explain, with solemnity and pride, how tragedy united a fractured world. Within university walls, professors and administrators keep the story alive. Introductory ethics classes cite the Moscow murders as a test of institutional resolve. Communication classes analyze media coverage and rumor control, and criminal justice majors shadow campus police as part of their field work. The lesson is always the same: vigilance, compassion, transparency. Digital platforms continue surfacing archive footage, interviews, and docuseries. Students who once headlined social feeds for their academic achievements are now memorialized for their spirit. Computer science students design safety algorithms based on the case emergency apps, live monitoring, data triangulation, all inspired by forensic timelines reconstructed after the murders. Elected officials, writing to constituents and national audiences, mention Moscow is speeches about reform. Grants for campus safety and trauma counseling grow, especially in small and rural towns, learning from Idaho's example. Stories written, voices raised, and lives honored ensure the crime is not forgotten, while the community is celebrated for its relentless hope. Ultimately, as each year passes, Moscow's legacy deepens not as a place struck by horror, but as a model for courage, healing, and the transformative power of a sentence truly earned. Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan are remembered not just as faces on a mural, but as the reason a town refused to surrender to the darkness. Their stories fuel classroom discussions, inspire nonprofit missions, and ground the work of every law enforcement agent sworn in since the case. Their names appear on plaques, in scholarships, and on wedding invitations and baby announcement, symbols that life continues, changed but undefeated. Objectively, the Moscow case reshaped protocol. Idaho law now requires faster notification of violent crimes on or near campus. Deterrent organizations work directly with university administration to ensure open channels for student safety concerns. Technology manufacturers credit the demands of Moscow's investigators for new encryption standards, cloud storage options, and location tracking features, an intersection of tragedy and technological progress. At the national level, Washington policymakers draft the Kaylee, Madison, Xana, Ethan Safer Students Act, a piece of legislation that allocates funding for campus security, counseling programs, and research into the root causes of on-campus violence. The bill, widely covered on TV and online, acknowledges that effective policy is forged not in the abstract, but in the crucible of real, devastating experience. As autumn cycles again, the banners go up at the University of Idaho, stories in yellow, tributes in gold, unity in every shade of resilience. The wind through the memorial garden is both elegy and anthem, a promise that their memory Moscow's sentence earned will always outlast even the longest night. In late-night conversations and early morning lectures, the refrain continues, Moscow is the town that met horror and answered it with heart, law, and clarity. Theirs is a story retold in every goodbye hug, every silent prayer, every policy passed with the victims' names attached not as symbols, but as callings to action. True crime series streaming worldwide now, and with lessons, not just the list of evidence and timelines, but the rallying call for prevention, awareness, and unbreakable community bonds. Teachers, social workers, and clergy reference the Moscow tragedy in annual training, every scenario framed as what would we do, who would we be. In these rooms, a new generation learns the value of readiness, the necessity of compassion, and the indelible cost of delay. Through it all, survivors are not left to navigate alone. Mutual aid groups, established as a direct legacy of the 2022 investigation, provide rapid outreach. University staff review each at-risk report with urgency. New partnerships between police and advocacy groups emerge, institutionalizing empathy as an integral tool of public safety. Museums, both digital and physical, create exhibits titled Justice in Real Time and Science Serving Memory, anchoring the Moscow case among the 21st century's most influential in criminal process and social healing. Attendees not only witness evidence, but hear family stories, watch the evolution of policy, and leave with guides to prevent and respond to trauma, ensuring that remembrance turns always toward renewal. Families and friends of the victims gather for private remembrances, circles unbroken by distance or time. Some read aloud from news reports, others from journals and writings left behind, each word a touchstone for what was lost and what endures. At candlelight vigils, the community's voices blend, soft, determined, undiminished. The town's legacy becomes a benchmark for change. Other college towns adopt proactive safety measures inspired by Moscow. Stronger illumination on walkways, emergency response drills, real-time reporting systems. Even athletic events pause for moments of silence, a powerful expression that communal activity reclaims what violence attempted to steal. Across the U.S., articles on campus safety best practices cite the Idaho murders and resolutions passed as a direct result. Congressional hearings invite testimony from Moscow's administrators and safety officials. Their words, powered by experience and marked by humility, shape policies that ripple outward, saving lives unknown, preventing future sorrow. In Idaho, the state legislature unanimously expands funding for campus law enforcement, mental health resource lines, and trauma counseling. The law is clear: nothing learned through pain will be wasted. Moscow's model, born in grief, persists in every survivor's embrace, every new light cast across campus, every story told that begins with loss and ends with resilience. Locally, children now grow up in a Moscow where community guardianship is not just a phrase, but a daily act. Volunteers walk students home late at night, neighborhood apps burst with helpful updates, and even distant alumni return for safety awareness events and remembrance runs. The digital landscape also transforms. Search engines prioritize coverage by certified journalists and verified first-hand accounts. Misinformation, in the wake of the Moscow investigation, is met with swift correction. Evidence-based sites climb the rankings, and stories highlighting the victims' achievements and personalities are recommended alongside case timelines and legal overviews. Art and music inspired by Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan circulate on communal playlists, local radio, YouTube, and Spotify. Each creative act, each tribute video, weaves their memory into the ordinary rhythm of town life. Art students stake on murals, musicians write commemorative ballads, and drama students stage plays based on the case, not focused on the violence, but on friendship, ambition, and indomitable hope. Parents, activists, and counselors compile a legacy curriculum, not a catalog of laws, but a handbook of hope, chapters on safety advocacy, examples of public courage, assignments about making a difference. The handbook travels far beyond Idaho, adopted by nationwide mental health and youth empowerment organizations as a model for action and healing. The spirit of remembrance endures, an unbroken thread pulled through the fabric of every new beginning. In broader circles, educators, activists, and crisis responders rally together each year to update resource kits, seek new grants, and refine emergency protocols, always crediting Moscow, always naming Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. On forums like Reddit, survivors and experts field questions from parents and students anxious for solutions, their advice practical, compassionate, rooted in the reality of lived experience. In Washington, D.C., policymakers host annual panels under banners reading Resilience Redefined, a nod to Moscow's determination and what it means for the country. They share case data, best practices, and personal stories with lawmakers, foundations, and the wider public. Authors release books on the legacy, some written by journalists embedded with the investigation, some by family members, some by academics analyzing data. Each title deepens the narrative, sentence earned, the Moscow murders and the power of community, forensics and friendship, lessons from King Road, and similar works climb bestseller lists, influencing research, advocacy, and media. In the town itself, graduates and newcomers plant new trees in the memorial garden each spring. Some name their children after the victims. Others volunteer at the university or donate to the safety funds. Moscow's renewal is gentle, but unyielding. A place where remembrance is daily action, and even the smallest kindness is a brick in the foundation of a stronger future. In the years following the case, Moscow hosts annual Light the Night ceremonies, where students, families, and citizens share stories, poems, and songs under the open sky. Local media live streams the event, and national channels prioritize coverage, echoing the town's message of communal strength and healing. It's not about dwelling on the pain, but about illuminating every pathway through loss and hardship. Law enforcement leaders mark their own milestones at these ceremonies, speaking candidly about the evolution of investigative techniques, the impact of community engagement, and the legacy of the Moscow investigation. Some describe what changed most: an ethos of transparency, survivor-centered policing, and interagency trust. Online, documentary fans, survivors, and investigators join forums for real-time watch parties and panel discussions streaming everywhere from Zoom to TikTok. Their comments show lasting curiosity about both process and recovery, and their questions reflect critical, compassionate engagement. How did Moscow do it? What can we learn? How do we turn memory into action? As winter yields to spring, and spring to another autumn of remembrance, the commitment deepens. Moscow's tragedy is never a mere narrative. It's an ongoing call to vigilance, advocacy, and empathy, a living record of what it means to transform suffering into solidarity and hope. In the present day, Moscow stands as a testament not to horror but to the power of response, recovery, and resolve. Its streets and university now serve as real-life evidence for what communities can accomplish when they refuse passivity. Legislators and educators coordinate remembrance dialogues, fostering collective guardrails for ensuring that no victim is forgotten and every lesson is applied. On anniversary nights, the memorial garden glows with lanterns and quiet laughter, proof that joy and mourning coexist, that tomorrow is always possible even after unimaginable loss. Student leaders organize roundtable discussions and emergency response workshops, open to anyone wishing to contribute to Moscow's ongoing safety and wellness initiatives. These future-focused gatherings, documented and shared globally, highlight the legacy of young lives and the community that chose to honor them with action. International guests arrive to study Moscow's transformation, drawn by stories of forensic breakthroughs and community leadership, looking to replicate the magic in their own cities. Moscow's model becomes a blueprint for training, resource allocation, and meaningful prevention. A way forward design in the wake of grief, refined every year through remembrance and renewal. Children skipping across the memorial's stone path are gently reminded by elders, "We are here because of courage, not fear." The refrain echoes across homes and boardrooms, a unifying thread of resilience. Vigils, remembrance walks, and art installations continue to punctuate the calendar, their presence gentle, unwavering, anchoring the Moscow murders in a context of progress and perpetual gratitude. Old friends and new neighbors build lasting connections through grief-turned action, laughter slowly growing where silence once fell. Families of the victims, though forever marked by loss, become beacons for resilience. They mentor others touched by tragedy. Parents, students, advocates sharing hard-won wisdom and spreading hope in the darkest places. Their testimony before school boards and legislative committees is met with standing ovations, and each heartfelt remembrance fuels further improvement across states and sectors. For those who visit Moscow, the experience is transformative, a town rewritten not by what was taken, but by what was built in its wake. Taxi drivers share stories of the investigation's milestones, young people tour the memorial with reverence, and local business owners display yellow ribbons as a continuous pledge to the for lives that became their purpose. Web searches and news feeds may still spike every November, but no longer do they focus solely on the violence. Instead, trending queries are Moscow resilience movement, Idaho victim advocacy, and community healing after tragedy. These are the echoes of a narrative reclaimed, a testament to the impact of justice truly earned. As the story concludes, Moscow's journey radiates far beyond its borders. The final chapter is not silence, but the rising hum of a town in constant motion. Teachers inspiring safety advocacy, law enforcement instructing classes nationwide, community leaders consulting with towns seeking their own blueprints for healing. At the heart of it all stands the memorial garden, its trees tall and steadfast, roots entwined in memory and hope. Graduates walk past the stone archway dedicated to Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan, pausing to lay flowers, speak in whispers, or simply reflect. The air is filled with a sense of promise. The next generation will be safer, more resilient, because the tragedy was not in vain. Media and visitors always ask, "What is Moscow's secret?" Townspeople reply with conviction, "We never give up. We name our grief, learn from it, and protect what matters most. That is our sentence earned." The closing frames of every documentary, every article, every campus orientation fade in on the town at dusk, a chorus of voices reciting the names, a candle in every window, and for stars join overhead. In Moscow, justice was more than a legal verdict. It was and remains the ongoing act of remembrance, courage, and hope. Watch the next story that appears on your screen. You will be moved.